so we can even.
Ooh.
We're live.
And we're live. So, good morning, everybody. Today, we thought we would do a little bit about how you are profit's worst enemy. So, we see this quite a lot in business where you want to make a profit. You've set up your business, you think you have it all sussed and you know what you're doing, you know your customer base, you might even have a nice little business plan all written down. But there are several things that we see, 4 really common themes where you are your own worst enemy of profit. So where do you want to start, Harry?
I think we'll start with the issue of pricing. This is one of the ones that people are most aware of.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, most small business owners, from experience, have underpriced a contract somewhere down the line. The reality of the situation is you might continuously be doing this. And the reason we say this makes you your own worst enemy is because usually the reason you're underpricing isn't necessarily because the client can't afford it. It might be that the barriers are stopping you perhaps issuing the invoice at the level you perhaps should be.
Or the quote. Yeah, it's got to start at the level of quote, hasn't it? So why aren't you charging the price that you want to charge, and why are you charging what you think you ought to charge? And sometimes that's down to confidence. Sometimes it's down to not understanding what your customer will pay and what they really want, where the value is in what you're doing. Sometimes it's down to not understanding your marketplace and knowing that there are other people out there that are commanding a higher price, but you don't really understand what for and why. But the same common denominator is affecting the outcome, and that's you. It's you who is uncomfortable, afraid, and not wanting to charge the price that you think you want to charge or that you need to charge in order to make a profitable business.
There's often an emotional barrier there as well. You feel almost guilty for charging a certain price, or perhaps you don't quite feel you're worth as much as you should be. And it really is just the emotional side that's holding it back in most cases.
And what happens is you end up pricing what you think somebody can afford. And what happens there is that you become the enemy of your own ability to make profit, and you end up pricing jobs that are a bit cheaper, and then you get a bit, maybe resentful, and then maybe the job overruns a little bit and you haven't priced for the scope creep, and you have been the worst enemy of your own profit. So the simplest solution to that is to outsource, and one of our clients did exactly that. They found a sales team that was expert in their industry, and now their sales team is the one that prices the jobs because they can do it without emotion. They are not emotionally tied to that sale. So if that sale doesn't get made or the customer doesn't buy, they don't care because they've moved on to the next one. They are emotionally detached, which is not, it's unlike the way most of us run our businesses. So outsourcing is a super way of dealing with that kind of issue. Issue number 2.
Should we move on to not chasing?
Not chasing.
Probably a big one. So this one's kind of an emotional factor as well. It can be a time factor as another issue, but simply not chasing the debts. So you've raised the invoice, the debt is outstanding, customer hasn't paid you, but you don't actively chase them.
No.
So you just sort of
rude.
let them plod along. Yeah, it's rude.
You don't want to
call them. But the reality of the situation is you've delivered a service or you've delivered a product, and you are entirely entitled to the money, and you should be chasing for that money. And it doesn't have to be a rude chaser. I mean, in most instances, a chaser is just a case of, by the way, this is outstanding, it's now overdue, and they just go, oh, I genuinely just forgot. That is the sort of thing. So just don't worry about that side of things. Just either send them an email, pick up the phone, find out which one suits you best, which one suits your personality best. If you're worried that an email comes across in a certain way, then pick up the phone, because obviously you get a different meaning behind a phone call to that of an email. Depending on how you write it, depending on how you ask it, it really does just vary.
The nice thing about phone calls is it's very difficult to keep saying to someone, if you're on the receiving end of a phone call chasing money, it's very difficult to keep saying, no, I'll pay it next week, I'll pay it next week, I'll pay it next week, because it's your integrity and you kind of feel like you have to do what you say you're going to do. So people feel embarrassed. So that's a really good thing about phone call chasers. But phone call chasers take a lot of time. So the next best thing is to have an automated system in place. So something in Xero, you have invoice chasers, or you can to have an add-on like Fluidly or Chaser, which will automatically chase things for you, which kind of takes the emotional impact out of doing that job. We had a client a couple of years ago who never chased their debtors, always waited for people to pay, and then each morning she'd be looking at the bank balance thinking, oh my god, they haven't paid that, how am I going to pay my bills this week? And we'd say to her, but why aren't you chasing? And she said, but it feels rude. It feels rude. I feel uncomfortable. I'm outside my comfort zone. I don't mind doing the job. I'm happy to bill, I'm happy to quote, but I don't like chasing. So outsource it. If you really don't like doing it, outsource it. Again, outsource it to a credit specialist or a bookkeeper or someone who can just do the job for you and chase that up. If you're earning any more or billing more than sort of £20-30 an hour, then your time is much better spent getting on and doing the job and servicing your clients and bringing on new clients, not chasing for credit control. Outsource that to someone who isn't emotionally attached and will happily chase those debts for you if you are the person standing in the way of your customers paying.
And remember, a sale is a gift until it's paid for. That's the nicest analogy. There are many more blunt ways of putting that, but that's the one I'm going to use in this argument. So definitely do chase.
The third way that you're getting in the way of your own profits is by not billing for stuff you've done. And we see this an awful lot. You're so busy doing the job, you're so busy going out chasing for new jobs, and you're so busy getting on and getting that done that you forget to bill for the job, or you forget to bill for the extras that you've done, or you haven't quoted for the extras that you've done. So you've done a load of work and then you've put a bill in and somebody's complained about it because they weren't expecting all these extra costs. It reminds me of a Facebook post actually I looked at a couple of weeks ago. So a friend of mine had a leak and called a plumber at 6 o'clock in the morning because she had a leaky toilet and the water that was leaking was so intense it was going through and dripping into her kitchen. So she called an emergency plumber out. The emergency plumber came out at 6 o'clock in the morning, or 6:30. I think he got there within 30 minutes, which was quite good. Town centre location. He came in, he parked up, he brought his van of tools. He found out that the cistern and the fittings were all Victorian, so he didn't have stuff that would immediately fix the problem, but he was able to take stuff that he'd got, adapt it while he was on site, solve the initial problem and fix the leak, but he had to come back with specialist parts to fix the job properly so that it wouldn't happen again and prevent any further leaks. Unfortunately, he probably only did 2 or 3 hours worth of work for her, but his bill was so high, it was up in the sort of £500-600 worth. When she got the bill, she was absolutely shocked and mortified. Now, she hadn't taken into the fact that he'd come out of hours, he'd travelled to the job, he'd brought his his van of tools and all his specialist equipment, he'd adapted to solve the initial problem and prevented any further leaks, which would have prevented thousands of pounds worth of damage. And he'd come back and source specialist parts for her Victorian fittings and fix them later on. Now, from her perspective, he charged her and overly charged her for several hours worth of work. From his perspective, he thinks he's done a great job because he's resolved the problem. What he didn't do was let her know beforehand what the price was likely to be, or explain the value that he was giving, or perhaps tell her what he had done. He sent her a single one-line bill that said, fixing the toilet, £600. So she's complained about him. Now, I think she got great value for money for what she was receiving. She thinks she was ripped off. She's posted over Facebook. She's complained about it in various business groups. She's been encouraged but hasn't named and shamed him, all for the sake of him not perhaps clarifying what he's done for her and giving her a value. So that's a real lesson. I was quite surprised at how many people then commented on that same post about the outrageousness of this trader overcharging. But at the end of the day, this guy still has to make a living. He has to pay for his tools. He's done his training for several years. That's why she called him and didn't do the job herself. So there was a real gap between perception of value and given value and how much it costs. So that was really interesting to me.
But that just goes to show one-line invoices are your own worst
Yeah,
enemy.
yeah.
I mean, the amount of times a client will ask for an itemized invoice is crazy. If you can provide an itemized invoice, I would recommend doing so for a few reasons. The main one being that they know exactly what's going on, it's fully justified. But also, if they dispute anything, you can see exactly what they're disputing, rather than, well, usually when an item's disputed, it disputes the whole invoice, puts the whole thing on a bit of a back burner. But at least you can identify exactly what's causing the issue. And actually, if you raise one invoice for, say, the initial service and a second invoice for the other extended service, actually you're protecting yourself a little bit. Because if they dispute one element of charge and not the other, then one payment gets delayed, but the other one gets paid on time, usually. So it's worth actually separating your invoices into a little bit more detail and raising them in the first place. Because that's the other delay, is when some people actually, it gets to the end of the month and they think, I need to raise my invoice for last month. And it gets pushed back a week, then a week, then a week.
And that was part of the problem in this instance, because the bill came in so late, because I guess he was busy. It was at least a month to 6 weeks after he'd done the work. By that time, she'd forgotten the value that she'd received and was angry at the bill she received. So it's a lot to be said. Yeah, it's a lot to be said. But again, he could have clarified that by coming in the morning and saying, I think this is going to take, X amount of hours. It's going to be an approximate cost. So she could have been given the opportunity to go somewhere else. I mean, perhaps that's not what he wanted, but he could have given her the opportunity to check with other suppliers that what he was charging was reasonable. So it was a conundrum. So the fourth way we see, and this often affects new business owners, the fourth way of new business owners standing in the way of their own profits is simply by not getting yourself out there and not getting yourself known. You're so busy working in the business and dealing with your day-to-day clients that when you've done with your day-to-day clients, you've got no new clients because you're not marketing, you're not putting yourself out there. You're not blogging, you're not advertising, you're not doing whatever it takes to do that you need to do to get your name known in your local area or in your area of expertise as the go-to person for that particular product or service.
In a strange way, actually, don't let yourself get too comfortable, because from the instances I've seen where this happens the most, it's usually when the client goes, okay, I'm happy with this. I've got this level of client. I've got this really big contract. I've got all this going on. I'm happy. So they sit back and they don't do anything. And the reality is, if a single thing happens to any one of those contracts, they're just losing profit instantly because they haven't actively tried to even start replacing them. So they're trying to basically start from a stop position rather than hitting the ground running. So it needs to be a continuous process. You need to keep putting yourself out there and taking yourself out of your comfort zone, because it's a missed opportunity if you don't. And the reality is, it's usually ourselves stopping that from happening. I don't want to do it because of this, or I don't feel comfortable with it, etc. But the reality is, it's so worth doing. It's just got to be done.
Well, it has to be if you want to have a pipeline of new clients coming in once you've served your existing clients. It may be that your particular business model is a monthly retainer or ongoing clients, but not that many are. A lot of our clients certainly need to constantly push for new people coming in. So you've got to keep pushing yourself out there. Work out where your ideal customer is, work out where they hang out, and make sure that you're getting in front of them. It's a tough thing to do. And again, if you don't know how to do it, get some expert advice from a business coach or a specialist in that area. A mindset coach, perhaps, if it's you that's afraid to get out there, but somebody who's going to hold your feet to the fire and make sure that you're out there promoting your business and learning what to do. Otherwise, you're just the one thing that's standing in the way of your own profits. So it's a bit like having a shop but keeping the doors closed, and nobody wants that.
No one wants that at all.
So those were our top tips for today. Make sure that you are pricing your business properly. Don't stand in the way there. Make sure that you are marketing your business. Make sure that you're outsourcing things like credit control that you don't like doing, and just make sure that you are not standing in the way of your own profits. So that's it from us today, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. Bye.